In Britain's towns and cities, behind closed doors, people are secretly preparing.
I'm preparing for a new dark age.
I'm preparing for a natural disaster.
I'm going to make sure that myself and those around me are prepared for anything.
They call themselves preppers, because for them, the end of civilization is coming, and they're prepared for it.
Within 10 seconds, you've got to don the mask.
If you go too late, you're dead.
These are the people spending their entire lives and thousands of pounds preparing for disaster. Are they paranoid and delusional, or is the rest of Britain mad for not joining them?
People say to me they don't understand why I am a prepper. I don't understand why you're not.
In the 21st century, we live in turbulent times. Violent civil unrest, financial chaos, and natural disasters are all common news stories.
The destruction here, they say, worse than anywhere else in Japan. 95% of the town gone.
In Britain, for most, life goes on unaffected, but a growing number of people are convinced that the country is on the edge of a disaster of its own.
If Britain lost electricity and oil, then within a week most people would be dead.
Bad things do happen. People's homes do get burnt down. There are floods. There are catastrophic events that affect people completely.
1 metre 88 and 114 kilos, Michael Sanderson is a former soldier who served in the Falklands War and Northern Ireland. Now retired, he lives with his wife and 2 young daughters.
People say to me, why are you a prepper? And I'm always baffled by it, because what I say to people is, I don't understand why you're not.
Possibly the greatest fear for any prepper is an impending natural disaster, and Michael is preparing for one.
If we look at Hurricane Katrina, the water level started to rise, and it got to a stage where suddenly they couldn't leave home, because now the water level is 30 feet deep, and my mum's 85 years old. You know, I've got young children. How do I get the family out? So they didn't leave. They stayed. And they expected somebody to come and save them. And nobody did.
In 2005, Michael watched the news that Hurricane Katrina had hit the Gulf Coast of America.
We haven't eaten in 3 days. Like to drown in my house. My house is totally gone.
I don't have home. I had a home downtown, but it's gone. It's under the water. I have nothing.
Water I have is right here. The clothes that I have on.
New Orleans was devastated by one of the deadliest storms ever to hit the United States. For this British prepper, it was a call to action.
What we see internationally is all these things happening on a day-to-day basis, but we don't think it could possibly happen here. Couldn't possibly happen here. Or could it?
If natural disaster strikes Britain, Michael isn't sticking around. It's what preppers call bugging out, and he keeps a trailer packed, ready to roll 24 hours a day.
What we've got here is my bug-out vehicle and bug-out trailer, and it's the provisions for me and my family for a minimum of 3 months. I think what we need as human beings is food, water and somewhere to sleep. And that's pretty much what's in this trailer. One of the hardest decisions you will ever make is when do you leave? Much better you go too early, because you can come back. If you go too late, you're dead.
1100 hours and Michael is bugging out. Of course, this isn't the actual apocalypse, it's a drill. But in a real emergency, Michael plans to be ready to leave home with his family in just 15 minutes. Five hours later, and Michael is set up at his secret retreat in Wales, where he plans to sit out the mock disaster using his military survival skills.
The provisions that we've got in place here allow us a slow and progressive transition to a simpler life.
Michael keeps his practice runs for bugging out as authentic as possible.
It doesn't matter how much stuff you've got, at some point it runs out. So I haven't used my petrol cooker because I'm surrounded by an abundance of firewood. So I'm bothering myself to get up in the morning, to light the fire and to keep it going. And I have a kettle of water on there, so there's hot water all day. I have a pot of coffee on the go all the time, just like I do at home. So it isn't going without. Nothing's changed. What I'm doing is I'm reverting to a simpler time.
As Michael enjoys the comfort of his home from home in Wales, 200 kilometres east in Surrey, another prepper is worried about another natural disaster.
It only takes, say, like an EMP from the sun with a coronal mass ejection, and it can potentially wipe out all electric grids in the Western world.
It might sound like science fiction, but department store manager Royston Upson is preparing for the aftermath of a solar flare. A solar flare is a large release of energy from the sun.
These are what the Mayan calendar is all based around. It's about solar maximus, solar minus. We're now coming into solar maximus.
Opinion is divided as to whether a large solar flare would wipe out every electrical device in Britain or just cause a bit of nasty sunburn. But Royston is in no doubt.
The system is fragile, incredibly fragile. Everything is reliant on electricity. Here we rely on Tesco's. Well, if Tesco's doesn't have any tills to work and there's no money in the banks, nothing is going to happen. And then after that, we're only 72 hours from anarchy. If that happens, that's when we go back to pre-industrial Victorian era lifestyles again, but only for the few who have prepared for it. Hello folks, it's Royston from Survival Instincts UK here, bringing you the UK's only survival and preparedness radio show.
Royston runs an internet radio show where he shares his fears for the future with fellow preppers.
Preparedness is nothing more than a physical form of insurance. We don't know when disaster is going to strike, so making sure that you've got your food, your water, your tools, your equipment in now is paramount before any emergency strikes.
Royston doesn't know how many preppers listen to his show. But there's no shortage of Brits uploading clips and showing off their kit online.
Here's a quick review on the latest knife I've got.
This is the S10 gas mask. I think it was used by the SAS.
So I thought I'd go through my kit just to see what I've got that I could use to maybe get the attention of these guys.
Sites like these can receive upwards of 300,000 views.
Just a quick bullet point on MRE meals ready-to-eat food.
As always, any comments? Love to hear them.
I hope that this video has been of some use to you.
Back in Surrey, Royston's not just talking about prepping, he's doing it.
Unfortunately, my lens isn't particularly a wide-angle lens, but I'll give you a basic guided tour of the storeroom.
The first rule of prepping is to keep the location of your kit secret. Royston made this video himself to keep his own equipment store safe from looters when the solar flare strikes.
We've got the cool box freezer, and then the barrel, all full of food, rice, black-eyed peas, black-eyed beans. We have got two huge petrol stoves, which are Swiss Army field cookers. On the main wall, we've got water jerry cans, petrol-type stoves, oil lanterns. It's cost thousands of pounds to get to this point, but I actually will be topping up my food to the point where I have at least 2 years' worth of food.
Royston is ready to survive the apocalypse, but he doesn't plan to survive it alone.
For me, in any emergency or disaster, the ultimate goal is just longevity. It's about actually having people around you who you can look after, they can look after you in equal measures. And it's about just effectively rebuilding and maintaining a level of society. I can equip about a dozen people all in all. I can actually create a community around me of like-minded individuals, people who can work, people who can actually help us build and construct. With the skills and the knowledge that I have for the situation, I think that leadership would be something that's forced upon me.
Whether it's building communities or bugging out to retreats, British preppers are planning for disaster. But one Briton believes the only true guarantee of survival is to bug out of Britain altogether.
You're talking 70 million people on an island, all competing for the same resources.
Science fiction author Edward O'Toole has left Britain. For the last 14 years, he's been living off the grid, nearly 2,000 kilometers away in a remote corner of Slovakia. Here, he met his wife Renata and started a family. And now, he's preparing them for disaster.
The most likely catastrophic situations that we could experience are natural disasters. I think there will be a new dark age, and I want to prep so that my children have a good chance of survival.
Back, please.
Back.
Yeah, good shot, that one.
Edward believes that even governments are secretly preparing for a catastrophe.
There are lots of things being prepared for at the moment. For example, China and Russia have both been building vast bunkers. Russia now has enough bunkers to house the entire population. In America, people are trying to build bunkers, but they can't get the equipment and they can't get the companies to do it because the government has been hiring these companies to build theirs. On a much, much higher level, there obviously is something in the works.
Do some people think your ideas are far-fetched, even crazy?
Yeah, of course.
While Edward's fears can't be corroborated, he's preparing for the worst. And that starts with not relying on supermarkets.
In terms of prepping, this type of food source, the hare, these are ideal for breeding as a protein source and for fur. They're very easy to keep. You just keep them in a small hutch, you feed them hay, and when they get to, say, 6 months old, they're for the pot. Every prepper should have these. Look, hero, forgive me for what I'm about to do. May your next life be better, and thank you for feeding my family. No, he's dead.
Prepping is about getting back to basics, and 14 years of experience in Slovakia have taught Edward that there's more to dining on a hare than just knowing how to kill it.
One thing you have to quickly get rid of is being squeamish. Now here, and traditionally in Slovakia, and traditionally in England, lungs were a big thing. Lots of people eat the heart. I'm not a fan. I'll throw this to the animals. That's it. Join them together. And now we hang them.
Edward's not the only prepper in the family.
I need you to get rid of the bark from about, say, here, all the way to about here. I have to make tripods for either side of the spit roast. And then he's going to whittle this down for the actual roast to go on top. My kids love this lifestyle. You really learn necessity, like improvisation, and that's something that you don't have if you can go to like a big store or a big supermarket. Or
I think that knowing all these skills helps to survive if something happens.
After hours of preparation, it's time to cook.
You might not want to watch this. I've probably been preparing since I was about 15, 16 in one form or another. Obviously now I have a family. There are 5 of us. I've got to think about feeding 5 people each day, day after day. You know, I don't want my 5-year-old daughter, like, starving. It's very, very muscly.
Who's a rabbit sportsman?
A high jump champion.
While Edward's family are practicing surviving off the grid, for some British preppers, a remote hideaway is not an option.
OK, folks, so urban survival, actually living in a city. Now, if you imagine there's any form of disaster, especially if power goes out, the shops will be looted and ransacked. There won't be the law and order that we have today. It's going to effectively turn into a war zone.
After natural disasters, the next biggest fear for our preppers is the breakdown of law and order. In 2011, riots started in London and soon spread to other parts of Britain. Properties were looted, shops were torched, and mob rule took over.
If we were here in this very place 12 years ago, you'd have seen buildings on fire. You know, this was a riot hotspot. Towns and cities are dangerous places. You know, an awful lot of people fighting for the same resources, you know, is a dangerous place. What you're talking about is the biggest, the toughest, the meanest, getting whatever's going.
People would become very desperate because within 72 hours, most of the supplies would have gone. Even grandma might pick up a kitchen knife in order to actually get a loaf of bread from the next door neighbour because they may not have anything in the house.
In a town in Hampshire, one man is preparing to survive a state of urban chaos.
To control any civil unrest, nerve gas, tear gas and type of chemicals might be used to subdue whatever civil unrest there is. So if for some reason I had to clandestinely and stealthily go through that area, I'd want to be protected.
This is an NBC suit, nuclear biological chemical. It actually protects you as best as possible from environmental contamination.
Pete Stanford is a personal development coach who's been a prepper for 5 years.
If there was WROL without rule of law, then it would be more of a militia that would be controlling civil unrest.
While most of Britain shut themselves indoors watching the riots in horror, Pete was planning his escape from suburbia to his secret bug-out location just 8 kilometres out of town.
This inflatable canoe is going to enable me to navigate on the waters to get to my bug-out location, which is on an island a little way from here. I do a dry run, a sort of practice run, at least every 6 weeks to 2 months at least. I'm always keeping myself on charge and ready for anything, really. I'm ready to get in now, obviously stepping in backwards. So if it did give, you've still got terra firma to keep hold of.
To survive the breakdown in society, Pete plans to hide out on an uninhabited island in the middle of the river.
I'll be taking the canoe into the area of where one of my caches are, hide it there, keep it stored, then I'll be going to my main bug-out location.
A crucial part of Pete's plan is secret stores of equipment he's buried on the island in special caches.
The cache is marked by 3 different marks in a particular area, because if you don't have the marks and you forget, because the foliage changes from season to season and the ground gets overgrown, you're going to find a problem actually finding it. Okay, so extra ground sheet, vitamin tablets, tinned food, wire that I can use for snares, and then in this container, again, I can procure water, boil it up in here, but inside here there's loads of practical items. This box is about survival, basically, and I have another cache site elsewhere, so I don't keep everything in the same place purposely, because if it got sussed or someone was to steal it or I was to lose it, having it spread over the island in different places. So this is one, and I've got 2 others on the island as well.
Pete reckons he could survive alone on the island until civil order is restored.
There's a lot of natural resources here. Obviously, I've got the water that I can procure and then treat. A lot of the vegetation is edible. And also there's animals that you can hunt as well, as a last resort. Wouldn't do that, wouldn't even attempt to do that leisurely, but as a last resort, then obviously I would have to do that because you need to eat to stay alive.
Another question that's often asked is about protein. When it actually comes down to it, folks, it says you're going to have to get your hands dirty. If you want protein, you are going to have to learn how to kill.
Hunting is an essential skill in the prepper's repertoire.
When law and order breaks down, when there is no food in the supermarket, you need access to food, and you also need to know how to get the food. It's not as easy as people think. One reason I live here is the sheer abundance of wild game, boar and deer being the primary sources of meat.
In this part of Slovakia, hunting is an important aspect of rural life.
Oh, it's deer. Yeah, but they're only roe deer. But I think they're very young, they're very naive. People watching films where somebody walks into the forest with a bow and arrow, shoots a deer and walks out again, that just doesn't happen. Only in Hollywood. In reality, it's a long, long, slow process. The only way of hunting large game, really, is to sit in one place and wait for the game to come to you. Hunters here use shooting towers, which basically focus on the forest line, and it gets you away from the animals so they can't smell you, they can't hear you. And basically you sit and you wait for the animals at dawn or dusk to come out of the tree line, and then you shoot them. My sister-in-law shot one from here. This is where she shot her stag last year. But it took her 20 times, sitting here all night waiting.
So hunting isn't as easy as people think?
God, no. Hunting's a really, really long process.
A deer can feed a family like Edward's for up to 6 weeks. Back in Britain, one man has been getting ready for disaster by consuming the local Buckinghamshire wildlife.
I've eaten squirrel, rabbit, magpie. I tried once ants' eggs, which is a bit of an acquired taste.
Tree surgeon Malcolm Bowler has been collecting weapons for more than 20 years.
These are all weapons that I could use for hunting animals in the wild. I've shot rabbits and pigeons and squirrels with these guns quite easily. It will take them out. If you wanted to take something big, you could use a crossbow like this. It is illegal to hunt with crossbows in the UK and with bows, but I suppose in a dire survival situation you could, you know, if you had no choice. To me, prepping is like learning first aid skills. You hope you don't need it, but it's better to be safe than sorry. But if it came to a situation where you had to feed yourself on meat, then you're definitely going to have to take an animal's life.
As well as shooting, Malcolm also practices how to trap animals for food.
This is a very simple kind of net trap. You've got the crossbar being held down by 2 hooks, and underneath it is the net, and then you've got a string that comes up along to like a counterbalance, and then you've got this dead fall weight, which is just what brings the net up in the air. You could catch with this probably something like, in the right areas and right situations, rabbits or squirrels. But if you had a net, a massive net, and a big enough weight, and these was big enough, you could potentially catch anything. And there's your rabbit or whatever caught in your net.
That might feed a family for a day, but what about the long term? In Slovakia, Edward's been thinking about the bigger picture.
Any survival situation, one thing preppers do need to learn is how many animals you need to take. You have to have a breeding stock for the next year. You have to calculate how many animals and of what type should you take per year. For example, if you have an abundance of 3 to 4 year old bucks, then you will take one of those. You're not going to take a fawn because it could grow up and produce more. You have to be very selective in your culling. The only thing really you need is experience. Practice, practice, and experience. Because when the proverbial hits the fan, it's too late. Yeah, you starve.
Greatest cities. I get scammed, so you don't have to. How you like me now?
Yeah, what is that thing?
That looks like a flying saucer.
We found evidence of an underground facility.
Oh my God!
How you like me now?
I'm preparing for the second worldwide Great Depression.
I've got guns, bullets, lots of bullets.
Me and my brothers, we only do business with me and my brothers. I don't want this to turn into a fight. Go against my father, you're going against me.
How you like me now?
Numa comunidade romena, o homem é o homem. A mulher sabe qual é o seu sítio e a família vem em primeiro lugar. Como é ser cigano em Nova Iorque?
The tradition. Stay gypsy. Everybody will respect you.
Conheça os Johns, ciganos a sério, ao estilo americano. American Gypsies, todas as quartas às 10h10 no National Geographic.
The World Heritage Special. Têm competências diferentes, mas partilham a mesma missão: proteger alguns dos locais mais importantes e vulneráveis do mundo. Desde a floresta amazónica ao Taj Mahal, acompanhe estes guardiões à medida que nos mostram o que é preciso para proteger estes tesouros magníficos. The World Heritage Special, sábado às 18h15, no National Geographic Channel. The World Heritage Special, sponsored by Panasonic. Ideas for Life.
Now, there's been lots of things going on in the world. They're still banging on about the world crisis when it comes to finance. They're still going on about the Eurozone and the Eurozone collapse. We don't know if the financial crisis is going to hit shore. We don't know if hyperinflation is going to hit us. And whilst we've still got money in our pockets to actually buy food in, we need to start doing this now because it is absolutely vital.
The effects of hyperinflation can be staggering. In the 1920s, in Germany's Weimar Republic, the currency collapsed. The German mark went from 4.2 marks to the US dollar to 4.2 trillion. Money became worthless. No surprise then that hyperinflation is a worry for these preppers.
There's nothing to say that the financial system doesn't collapse, which brings down the Western world as we know it.
So how exposed are the big four UK banks to the crisis in the Eurozone?
Countries are going further and further into debt. We just keep lending money to Greece and it disappears. We keep lending money, it disappears. No one's actually looking for a solution, and that scares me.
Greek MPs have been debating and will soon pass an austerity package that'll slash living standards.
In Stockport, Greater Manchester, one family is particularly worried. Noreen and Simon Dillon are preparing their house to be completely self-sufficient for when the British economy nosedives.
I do have industrial quantities of pasta and rice and beans and flour's starting to creep onto that as well now. There's a lot of money invested in this room, certainly is. The long-term food storage, which is this higher stuff up here, which can last for 25 years in these cans, that's quite expensive stuff. Everybody has life insurance, everybody has house insurance. I've just gone one step further and I've got myself some food insurance.
It's not a hobby. It's actually, this has become a lifestyle. We have our own food that we've grown, we have chickens, we make jams, we make preserves. We wouldn't need to worry.
For the Dillon family, self-sufficiency goes a lot further than just food. Their long-term aim is to be able to live completely off-grid. On the roof, there are solar panels, and the house is kitted out with emergency battery-powered lights. Even the loo has one.
You lift the toilet seat up, it lights the room up.
Why?
So I don't miss, because my wife would kill me if I missed.
For the Dillons, prepping is a family affair.
I think the kids enjoy the dad being a bit eccentric. They enjoy going foraging, they enjoy picking blackberries and eating most of them.
You can eat these anyway, if you want.
You can pick both.
You got some gloves and you can pick some nettles. Pick the younger ones. They're better for you. I do pass my knowledge on to my kids. My two younger children, especially Kaya. Kaya's really receptive. She loves it.
How does it make the nettles stop stinging though?
It cooks the sting out of it.
With thousands of pounds worth of supplies in the cupboard and a nettle omelette on the table, are the Dillons ready for global financial collapse?
The food I've got in the food store and the chickens that I've got and the foraging that I do and the garden that I grow out throughout the summer, I could probably keep myself going for about a year.
Some of these preppers who believe that stocking up their terraced house with tins and tins and tins, and that house will just be raided within days. I don't just stock up like some sort of hamster or squirrel and hope that the world passes me by while I can tuck in. You can't look at prepping like that.
In Slovakia, Edward thinks other preppers should follow his lead and be truly self-sufficient.
My family basically have a viable alternative using traditional methods or a simulation of traditional methods where we can bypass oil.
Edward set up to live without the fuel that we all take for granted.
This is the heating system for the entire house. The whole house runs on wood. When we burn the wood, the hot air travels firstly through the chimney and then into a series of pipes which lead to different rooms and transport hot air throughout the lower half of the house. The upper half of the house is all heated merely by heat rising. It's a very efficient system and obviously it only needs wood. And because we're surrounded by forest, we have an endless supply. Our civilization is completely based on oil. And when we pass peak oil and oil becomes too expensive for the common person, for example, goods in supermarkets are going to start really climbing in price compared to basically your salary, which is flat, which hasn't increased in years. There's going to be a much lower standard of living very quickly.
Britain only has 67 days' worth of oil stores, and in 2012, just the threat of a strike by fuel tanker drivers sent the nation into panic. But fuel isn't the only challenge for the self-sufficient prepper.
The most important is grow potato. Potato is basic thing what you need for cooking all year. So we wouldn't be survived from this potato, but we know how to make in case it will be necessary. We have a stock of potato for planting, so we would be make all this land what we have there full of potato. We are 5 members of family, 5 people, so we need a lot of food.
Having a vegetable patch is a continuous food source. If you just store food, ultimately you will go through it and then you'll starve. If you're trying to do it like year after year, you start thinking, what do you need next year? What do you need for, like, I mean, for example, potatoes, it's like an entire year cycle that goes through. Without the basic staples, you don't survive the next year.
Edward's even tackled the messy jobs.
Here we have the septic tank. I know this is a subject nobody likes speaking about. I mean, it's the ultimate taboo topic. But when you go to the toilet, you flush and, you know, everything's clean again. If there is any breakdown of civilization, that's not going to happen. If you're in a flat block, what are you going to do? You're going to have a huge shock, because all the things you take for granted, if they stop, you've got a massive cultural shock.
With many years of prepping behind him, Edward seems ready for anything. But everyone has to start somewhere, even preppers.
The specific point that I became interested in prepping was in the summer of 2011, just after the riots. I thought, wow, you know, this is really serious. This handful of kids can shut down London. You know, what happens if something really major happens?
In East London, expat American Annie Durbin is one of prepping's new recruits.
So in here we have some food supplies. I've got canned goods, I've got grains, I've got bulgur. I tried to get really healthy things. I've got mung beans. Enough there to last a couple of months, I think, which I think should be sufficient, because if the shit did hit the fan, I would probably not be able to stay here very long anyway. So I think that amount of food is probably about right. This is one of my boxes of stuff.
Over the past few months, she started putting her survival pack together.
This is one of my favorite items, my knife. My little commando knife. Makes me feel tough. That's it. It can be made into a spear with the little holes. I can't imagine I'll need a spear, but you never know what's going to happen. That's a handy-dandy little item to have. Prepping is a statement of independence. You know, I'm taking the situation into my hands. I don't like the feeling of being helpless. I felt so helpless when the stores were shut, when the riots happened, and I thought, this is pathetic. Wow, I've got lots of stuff in here. I haven't been through this in a while, so this will be interesting to see what I've got.
Not all of Annie's supplies are the standard prepper's kit.
Some various items in here to cover various aspects of life. And one of them is actually a couple versions of the Quran, because I live right in the middle of the largest Muslim population in the UK. So you never know. It's very good to adapt to your environment. And I've got baggies of all sorts of things. Oral hygiene things, a little hairbrush.
Why would you be worried about what your hair's like?
Oh, because even if you're out surviving, you still want to look nice, don't you? Still a matter of self-preservation, taking care of yourself. I think that's very important, especially if everything around you is collapsing. Apparently, I am unusual being a female prepper. There don't seem to be many others around. But I probably do think of issues that men don't think of. I've got lots of condoms and various lubes and things, because even in times of hardship, people have sex. Perhaps even more so in times of hardship. That's one natural comfort that they can easily get. So it's good to be prepared You don't know who you're going to encounter out there on the streets or in the wild, so it's best to protect yourself. You never know.
Annie's been thinking about the best way to bug out.
A lot of people that I've seen on the internet have a specific backpack with things in there that they can just grab and run. My thinking about that is that it isn't going to be so instantaneous, so quick. My bugging out consists of taking these containers, and I've sort of assessed the size of the things that I have. And yes, I can fit all of those in my car, and then I'll go.
To help her survive if she ever does have to bug out, Annie needs to learn bushcraft skills. So she's come to meet survival expert Royston.
You know what this is?
It looks like a rabbit to me.
It's a big rabbit. It's called a hare. So what we've actually still got here, we've got the kidneys, and we've still got the lungs in here as well.
Oh, yes, we do.
Okay. For me, actually having the skill of knowing how to prepare almost any animal is absolutely vital. This is the bit that most people don't like.
Oh, crunch.
So what we then do is get your hands in it, and it will just start to peel.
Can I do that?
You certainly can. And what you want to do is literally just pull up and down at the same time. Take it right down as if you're just like taking the coat off. Nice
and just pull?
Don't be scared. Just give it a good yank.
I'm not as strong as you.
That's it. Just keep going. Just keep going.
I was a bit nervous about that. I thought I might get a bit grossed out and queasy, but it really wasn't. It was fine. Here, let me try it.
Just literally just snap it, twist, and it'll pull off. There we go. Ta-da.
Oh my God, I did it.
It's actually vital to pass on knowledge. Too many people think that they should hoard it to themselves, and quite frankly, if you've got the skills and you've got the knowledge, you should be passing it on, because there's other generations, there's other people out there who really want to learn what you've got to say.
Okay.
Spoon?
Oh, do I get to?
You get the spoon.
You know, I thought this was going to be disgusting and that I was going to want to retch. It's actually really good. Wow, I'm impressed.
Okay, folks, I hope you guys out there are actually exchanging ideas and knowledge when it comes to preparedness. I know I am.
Hi guys and gals, it's Pete, Mindwise Man's channel, aka Maverick Outdoors.
My little channel's always been about survival.
For preppers, one way to improve their skills is to share their knowledge.
What I'm going to do with this video, I'm just going to do sort of a lot of bullet points, really.
This is the spot I've decided to set my little camp up in.
Like many others, Mike and Pete demonstrate their latest preps by posting video clips on the internet.
Recently I've had requests about my kit. Dry sack there, and then in here is all my food.
Their internet videos get hundreds of hits.
We know about survival.
So it's OOS, out of sight, OOM, out of mind, LNT, leave no trace.
Both men have become friends by sharing tips on the internet over the last year.
How are you, Pete?
Hello, Mike.
But today, they're meeting in person for the first time at Michael's bug-out location in Wales.
I've got my Peak wood-burning stove out.
It's a chance to compare preps and see if they have anything to learn from each other.
Warm enough to heat my hands up, yeah?
Definitely.
Brilliant. This is a good place to bug out because of the terrain. Now I've actually come here to see it in person. There's so many different aspects to it that it's not inviting to a casual person that might be just marauding through it for no particular purpose. That's the 36-hour survival kit in there. So if this was emergency, well, I'd have to drop and dump everything and just take this with me. 2 alley pegs, poncho, basher tarp, which I can shelter under or be on the move. Water filling bag to source some water, and then I've got dry food there, which I can, like noodles to heat up, but I can eat them dry, swig back the water.
Food, water, somewhere to sleep, mate. That's a nice little purse.
Yeah, it is.
That's the one I got given.
Oh, right.
That's the proper Maxpedition.
This is the
Yeah, that's the one that's come from the US. Pete's got some funky kit, you know. There were a couple of bits and pieces that he showed me that I have similar things.
Just over the top, central that, yeah?
That was good.
I was impressed with Michael's weaponry, considering in the UK there are very strict laws and regulations. So you have to be careful in the area that you practice your skills. Yeah, Central, but low. They're dangerous skills in the wrong hands, but we would use them for target practice, but also, if push comes to shove as a last resort, you can use those skills to feed yourself.
Considering you never used it before, mate, you're doing brilliantly.
Yeah, right.
Proof that prepping skills can always be sharpened up, but there's a serious side to this target practice.
The last thing you want in a serious situation is for someone to sneak up on you and steal all your preps. I would do everything possible to avoid a lethal confrontation. But if we ended up in a situation without the rule of law, would I use lethal force to defend my family? Every day of the week and twice on Sundays. Absolutely.
In Slovakia, Edward is also passing on his knowledge of weaponry.
What we can do today is you can do it like try kneeling. Let me load it for you. Okay. Kneel down, finger off trigger. I believe by teaching my children young and that they learn the respect for the weapon, they're not going to be silly about it, they're not going to make mistakes. Now take another half breath in and hold it and shoot. The worst thing possible is giving a child who's no experience a weapon. All right. They will try to emulate what they've seen on television, not how it should be used. Fire when ready. Good girl.
Edward's teaching his children these skills because, like all preppers, he's anxious about what lies ahead.
I think that he worries a lot about future. We speak about some catastrophe, we speak about end of world, but I don't think that kids really, in their age, understand that how bad is this.
If you look at the rise and fall of civilizations throughout history, and you look at how long they last and what happens to them, there are certain signals which signify that a civilization is about to, well, it's on its way out.
From Slovakian retreats to urban hideaways to small islands in the middle of rivers, British preppers are getting ready for catastrophe. But are they paranoid? Or should the rest of Britain be joining them?
Is it our time now? We don't know. But all I'm making sure is that I've got enough things in place that if it did happen, I can ride the storm out a bit more comfortable than the bloke next door.
What I hope we have created here is a means of living through a disaster rather than just surviving it, and living in the long term and living well.
You should be prepared for whatever eventuality may happen, because you don't know what's round the corner.
I'll keep prepping because it's a sensible thing to do, because I know the bad weather's coming and I'm doing something about it.
Prepare for the worst and hope for the best.